This is Dr. Jerryl Banait. Good evening, everybody. And today we are joined in live by one of a very famous celebrity from London, United Kingdom, Mr. Dan Richardson. And this person does not require a formal introduction, but I consider this as my personal pleasure and opportunity to introduce Dan Richardson to all of you. He's an international actor, he's a wildlife conservationist, and a vegan. He's also ambassador to 11 reputed organizations, charitable organizations all over the world. And he has also acted in a Disney TV series called The Lodge. And I have a kind of personal connect with Dan because he was one of the strongest or ardent advocate and representative from London, UK for Mother Tigress T1 Avni. During global protests for Tigress Avni, he was an integral part of our organization, and he held many protests in London and was a strong supporter to bring justice for Avni. So I take this pride to welcome Dan to this webinar, Wildlife Conservation and International Perspective.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. What an honor and what an introduction as well. Thank you very, very kindly. It was great to finally connect with you because we've been working in the same circles for quite some time. And as you mentioned, especially with Avni, the tigress, which was such a heartbreaking situation. But from the beginning, I was very well aware of your involvement, and you had such a huge fundamental part to play in the fight to try and protect her, which obviously ended tragically, but not for lack of trying. And thank you so much for everything you did. It was incredible. And it was the very least that I could do over here in London to be actively trying to help in some way. It was a beautiful silent protest we had, and it was very emotional day. And more so even when we saw the tens of thousands of people that flocked into the protest marches in all the cities around India. That was so reassuring and beautiful, even though it didn't end the way we wanted it to. The fact that there's so many people behind the movement was inspiring and reassuring, and you were at the forefront of that, and I'm so grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So talking about Avni brings so many old memories, and we have been working so hard to protect tigers and fight a legal battle to avoid shoot-at-sight orders, or when the shoot-at-sight orders are given, to protect these tigers from being killed and get them tranquilized and brought back to captivity and rewilding them. I would like to start a topic that is tiger conservation, and what is the need of tiger conservation in today's scenario, and how can we go about it? So if you could shed some light on tiger conservation and why is it of prime importance in today's world?
Well, I'm a guy who feels every species is important, and I really mean that. I stand behind any species that's in trouble, whatever it may be. And a lot of the biggest challenges in conservation are with the lesser known and therefore often overlooked species. So, we've all heard more recently about the pangolin because of this pandemic situation, which I'm sure we'll get around to talking about that too. But that was an animal that was largely unknown to most people, and the conservation threats that it faced were largely unknown as well. But it's literally the most trafficked animal in the world. And when you think about it from the perspective of an animal like a tiger, which is probably one of the best known, most iconic, most charismatic animals on earth, most loved by people, if we can lose the tiger, that speaks volumes about the trouble we're in and how badly we've lost our way. And I think, so symbolically speaking, tiger conservation is as important as anything else. And like I said, I say that with the caveat that all animals matter. I don't care whether we're talking about mice or elephants or anything in between. It's all important. The bee, we're talking about bees, being so critical to the ecosystem and to our own survival. And So it doesn't matter what it is, but if just on principle alone, if we can lose the tiger on our watch, then that to me does not bode well for a future of conservation of any kind of any species. So it holds a great deal of importance in that regard as well. And of course, you guys in India, you're well aware of all the statistics regarding tigers. It's terrifying. The numbers are terrifying. So we have a burgeoning population globally, but of course true in India as well. So therefore the natural habitat's being decimated. It's shrinking rapidly. So there's less and less natural environment for the tigers to be in. And then there's more and more threat to them, whether that's just or unjust, as we saw in the case of Ardent, where it's just a clear case of some kind of an agenda being served in the background, which led to her demise. And you've got less tigers in the wild now than you have in the United States living as pets in people's backyards, literally.
True.
And so if we, I don't know, I always find it, and I realize the need for us to discuss this, but I always find it staggering and terrifying in equal measure that there are questions around these endeavors of ours, these efforts we make to protect animals like this, with those statistics that we know about, that we fear the critical point, the tipping point may already have been reached with these animals. And we've seen it happen with so many, and we know that we're in the midst of seeing extinctions left, right, and center, the sixth mass extinction event, all entirely man-made. If we can't protect the tiger, I don't know. I don't know what that says about us as a species and our ability to defend what matters.
So you just mentioned about America having more tigers in their backyard than the wild tigers which are moving in the forest. So I would like to quote some statistics over here. So approximately 60% of the tigers out in the wild are in India. And the city where I live in, that is Nagpur, is called as tiger capital of the world because the density of tigers in and around my city is the highest in the world. And as we were talking, that tiger is a metaphoric animal. As you mentioned about bees, as you mentioned about mice, as you mentioned about other smaller species, the pangolin. Tiger is a metaphoric animal which represents all the wildlife, all the animals, all the flora, all the fauna, even the microbes which are present in the jungle, even the scavengers. So if tiger is protected, if there is a tiger inhabited jungle, that means that jungle is ecologically balanced jungle or a forest.
Correct.
So it has good number of herbivores, it has good number of water bodies, it has good number of trees, shrubs, scavengers, everything. So if a jungle is to be represented, how good of a jungle it is, we count the number of tigers that are inhabitant in that particular forest. And that is why forest or tiger in particular takes form of all the animals, take form of the entire jungle. And to protect tiger is to protect the jungle environment and protect ourselves, because 60 to 70% of the rivers in India, which if we take their origin or from where they are originating, it is from a landscape which is tiger dominated. So the origin of the rivers and the drinking water which we get in cities is from a forest and is from a reservoir that is inside a tiger habited or inhabited land. So to protect our drinking water, to have fresh air, to have the water which we require for survival, we need these tigers. So it will not be a step overboarding if I say for human survival, we need tigers. And I have been fighting a legal battle to radio collar all the tigers in the wild so that they can be a better monitoring system, and there can be an alarm system if they are coming out of the forest or into human settlements, and all the villages can be notified in advance that there is a tiger movement and that you should not come out of your houses or do not go in the forest or in your fields to protect yourself, which will heavily reduce the man-animal conflict. So what is your point of view on radio collaring all the tigers? Which
I think it's a great idea. I mean, we have this conversation in regards to African wildlife as well, where you have the I kind of vaguely understand the view, but I think it's a deeply flawed criticism of radio collaring, which is that photographers will say, yeah, but it doesn't look so good with a collar. Like, it looks a lot better alive, and the collar is very likely going to make it survive rather than, as you say, walk into a situation of human wildlife conflicts. And as we know, we've both seen this happen, and the situation unfolded with Avni in terms of it doesn't even need to, the tiger doesn't even need to encroach on human habitat in order to be labeled a man-eater. And unjustly so as well, because of course the reality of the legal definition of being a man-eater requires a tiger or leopard or whatever it may be to habitually stalk and kill and eat human prey. So what we've seen is that people will stray, farmers or cattle grazers will walk into protected areas of forest habitat where the tigers are known to live. This is no surprise to them. And then when this apex predator sees a lolloping prey animal, like a herd of cattle, along with a human being, no surprise it attacks. Well, in that kind of a situation, if the tiger was to then maul and kill the man, that's not a man-eater. Even if the tiger was to go on and eat the person, if it was starving, perhaps it would. That's still not, that doesn't constitute a man-eating tiger. The tiger is in its own habitat. Someone encroached on that habitat, and bad things happened, and it's tragic and it's dreadful. But that happens even in the tiger's own habitat. So when it's a case of a tiger which is perhaps, its food resources are diminished and it's not finding prey, and it's wandering into a human area, an inhabited area, then there's no downside to radio collaring tigers or leopards indeed, or anything that, I'm a full advocate and supporter for radio collaring. I think it's fair to say that if Cecil the lion had been radio collared, he wouldn't have been shot.
Correct.
So it's a case of thinking, well, I bet, there's a few photographers that would be disappointed that they'd have to Photoshop out a collar or just not take the photograph in the first place. But I can get over that. But Cecil the lion being killed for sport, I say in inverted commas, I can't get over, and nor should anybody be able to. And so radio collaring, absolutely, if that's what it requires in order for humans and animals to coexist peacefully, I'm all for it. I'm absolutely all for it. So I support your efforts and your advocacy for that kind of action.
Correct, Dan. And what you just mentioned about man-animal conflict, and that because of natural instinct, a tiger might kill an animal which has encroached in its territory, which is actually his own home.
Right.
I would like to quote the National Tiger Conservation Authority over here, which is the nodal body for protection of tigers in India. So in its standard operating procedures of 2011, which has been amended after Avni's case, and now the man-eater term has been scrapped, and no private hunters are allowed in any kind of rescue operations. And there are many good amendments which have happened, and it was a boon in disguise that after Avni, this all could happen. So it states, and I would like to quote the National Tiger Conservation Authority over here, that a man-eater tiger or a problematic tiger or a leopard is the cat which comes out of its own natural territory into human settlements and lurks on humans as its own prey and kills and feeds on the human flesh habitually. So each and every word is very important in this particular definition.
Absolutely.
Can be termed as a man-eater, but there has to be a differentiation made between a habitual man-eater and a chance encounter which might have occurred in a sugarcane field or near the fringes of forest or near the farmlands, which are encroaching the tiger habitat or the territories. So we have to understand that they are living in their territories, and culling them is not an option. So I would, with this, I would like to sum up about the tiger conservation and their killing. And I would like to ask a new question to you. That is, how far is it justified to cull animals and declare them as vermin and issue shoot-at-sight orders to, there are so many times, even in America, even in parts of Africa, where in particular season or in particular time period, they allow the hunters to come in and curl down the animals just uh, in name of curbing down their population or
Yep.
controlling their population. How much do you think is justified to do so?
Well, the simple answer is not at all. I don't think it's justified at all in any situation. By the way, we have it here in the UK as well, albeit not in terms of things like, predatory animals that we fear ourselves. But if, for example, fox hunting here in the UK, the entire argument behind the still continuing with fox hunting, even though I have to add it's illegal, it's people who partake in this find loopholes, and they've always done it on the basis that the animals need culling, they need controlling. I find it deeply, deeply disturbing that, let's put it this way, the population management, control of species is the self-proclaimed responsibility of the most out of control, destructive species on the planet. It's the equivalent of putting locusts in charge of crop management. It's absolutely laughable. And I think what I find most unsettling about that position that humans have put themselves in is that you just talked about this beautifully when you spoke about Ardent and tiger habitat, and how just like elephants or rhinos or large animals, predatory animals or not, absolutely play a fundamental role in a healthy ecosystem. And the thing about culling of animals in the UK, as I say, we have the fox hunting issue. The point at which everybody wants to start the conversation is always a point of convenience. It's not the real start point. So, for example, with fox hunting, the start point is, you just said it perfectly. You just used the word vermin. In the UK, foxes are labelled a vermin or a pest. Well, here's the actual reality: is that you have a predatory animal that's natural in that habitat. You encroach on that habitat, and then you develop it for your own convenience, and you place, as part of that convenience, a prey animal right there in the center of this habitat where the predator still lives but is being forced to adapt. And now when that predator adapts and hunts and kills chickens and does what a fox does, which is not just kill one chicken but kill them all with the intention of coming back, because that's how they survive. And it's literally done on the basis of the survival instinct. It's not because they're thinking, this upsets me, I'm going to kill all these chickens for fun, or because I'm angry. It's pure adapting survival instinct. But no one ever wants to start the conversation from the real start point, which is, well, we encroached on a predator's landscape and then put a prey animal into that landscape, and now we've labeled it a pest because it's done all it can do to adapt and survive. That's never where the conversation starts. And the same thing is true in India with tigers. The same thing is true in Africa with lions, with elephant, with whatever it may be. We label them problem animals, trouble animals, pests, vermin. It's absolute nonsense. And I think it's never justified. If we stayed out of it, if we left the ecosystem to itself, guess what? It takes care of itself perfectly, which is why you need the apex predators, because everything works from there. It's a trickle-down effect. Everything works perfectly. And what's indicative of that, and frankly embarrassing for the human race, is that the ecosystems that work are the ones we stay out of. As soon as we interfere, everything collapses, and then you have species control, population management, culling, and all the rest of it taking place. It's an absolute nonsense.
I agree totally, Dan. As a matter of fact, we are encroaching their habitats, and then we are declaring them as pests and vermin. Similarly, an incident happened in Australia where they had issued an orders to kill down all the camels over there. It was not a few months ago, I think, not more than a year this happened, not more than a year before this happened, that they declared all the camels to be killed, and many hunters...
Kangaroo, I think you mean kangaroo.
Not kangaroo, camels.
Oh, they did the same with kangaroos, amazingly enough.
Oh, that's the national animal over there.
Uh-huh. And it's considered a pest by many of them. Absolutely. Same thing.
Exactly. So there comes a time where we have to understand then when to label an animal as dangerous or a vermin or something which is not of use to human species in general. This is very, and I intend to put some sarcasm over here. that it is dangerous or not useful to the human beings, and they can be curled down. Do you think there
Yeah.
should be a international policies for this, that when can you declare an animal as dangerous to human beings or could be curled down?
Well, I'd like, yes, to answer your first part of that question, I absolutely think there needs to be an international convention. It's a massive concern that there aren't international conventions across the board where animal welfare and conservation is concerned, and let's not mistake things like CITES as that kind of international convention, because actually what that is, and I find this is again indicative of just how badly we've lost our way as a species, is that CITES stands for the last three letters: trade in endangered species. Convention in International Trade in Endangered Species. And when you have a sentence which includes the words trade with endangered species, something's deeply, deeply wrong as far as I'm concerned. And so there needs to be absolutely some kind of international convention that holds everybody globally accountable for animal welfare standards. And that covers so much. And unfortunately, because it covers everything. Even though I'm a vegan, lots of people aren't. Most people aren't, and there's still issues of things like live transportation of animals for food, livestock animals. While we address all of these issues, and while fingers crossed, the whole world slowly turns vegan, absolutely there are things we need to put in place in order to ensure the greatest possible welfare for animals which are being exploited, used, as you say, for people's convenience, profit, entertainment. As much as I wish none of it happened, it does happen. So therefore, of course, there have to be policies in place, regulatory bodies enforcing those policies to make sure that the animals get the best deal possible in what ultimately is still a pretty bad deal. But I just think it's terrifying how much what a lack of regulation there is, what a lack of any kind of international convention, and that covers everything, including what you just talked about, where an animal can be labeled as dangerous or inconvenient or a pest. And there's no, even on a local level, there's no convention. Even here in the UK, if they decided to label an animal a pest, there's no governing body that's going to oversee that and say, well, hang on a second, that contravenes the regulatory guidelines, as you've just described with Avni or with any tiger, that what constitutes man-eating tiger isn't what most people would think. And we need to have those regulatory guidelines in place. But not only that, probably more important than the guidelines themselves is they need to be enforced. They need to be enforced, and people need to know that there's a consequence, and a steep consequence at that, for contravention of those guidelines and regulations.
I totally agree. The implementation is more important than the guidelines or the laws itself.
Absolutely.
And I'm very surprised to know that there are no regulatory mechanism in the United Kingdom, which I suppose should have been there. And hopefully with international collaborations and international organizations and international celebrities like you, we can formulate, or we can push the governments across the world to regularize these kind of treaties and implement them. The most important aspect over here is to implement these policies.
Absolutely.
So we have